So I went as big as Google. I was doing engineering there, and as small as a startup car company in Africa. Got an internship at SpaceX. That was kind of following this interest I had in space, largely from my dad.
Love it.
And then after SpaceX, got an opportunity to do an internship with Tesla. I went there, focused on battery design, was really what I was interested in at the time. I ended up doing 2 internships.
What was that process like to actually land a job at Tesla?
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, where I bring the best and the brightest from business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. My guest today on the podcast is Angus Rittenberg. He is an engineer who is focused on cannabis infusion technologies and manufacturing advancements. As CEO and founder of Wynk, Angus oversees all aspects of production, quality control, regulatory compliance, while also designing and building machinery in-house to streamline productivity. This is pretty cool stuff. And prior to entering the cannabis sector, Angus was battery design engineer at Tesla, where he worked on the design and manufacturing of the Model 3 battery module. He now enjoys his design manufacturing experience to create novel production processes to navigate the strict regulatory mandates and govern the cannabis industry. We have a lot to unpack. Let's get to it. Angus, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Excited to tell you more about what we're doing.
I am excited to have it. And first and foremost, thank you. It's funny. My wife jokes around. She's, I think you only do the podcast to get free samples of stuff that you like. I said to her, I go, yes and no, because I engage with founders of companies whose category or products I actually enjoy. So it's double-sided, where I get to enjoy the product, engage with them, learn about it, and actually be like an advocate and an ambassador. And first and foremost, before we even get into it, the product is fantastic. We talked about it before. It is delicious. It has a good buzz. It's not too overwhelming. It's not too overpowering. And we're going to unpack that. But I just want to give you a quick kudos on having a freaking awesome product.
Thank you.
Good stuff. There's my consumer feedback, and let's get into it here. So over the last year, I've been switching up my first question because I find it really interesting to dig into founders' origin stories. And I think that starts with the parents. If you don't mind me asking, what did your parents do for a living?
Yeah, so I grew up in Pennsylvania on a small hobby farm. My dad did a lot of interesting work in his career with anti-counterfeit technologies, primarily for pharmaceuticals. So he was designing basically different ways to create packaging that you could easily test. So you could use devices that would look at the ink, and the ink would have sort of nano markers in it. So if, for example, somebody was creating counterfeit Tylenol at the pharmacy, somebody could scan it with a special device and just look at the label and very quickly say, this is an authentic product or is not. And these inks would be very hard to replicate. So he has a PhD in microbiology and use that to ultimately build lots of different anti-counterfeit markers in all kinds of products. So pharmaceuticals, fuels, currencies, very interesting business and career. And then my mom, very into horses, so she managed a horse park. Actually, my first job was working maintenance at that park. So we'd build jumps and fix the trails and all that sort of thing.
So you started shoveling shit, right? You started
exactly.
And there's but there's a power to that. Right.
Yeah.
Like I say, and I actually love to talk to folks in the restaurant industry as well there too. And there's something about that foundation, and not just being humbling, but knowing every aspect of the job and understanding why it's actually so important to shovel the shit, because otherwise horses get sick, and there's a reason for everything.
Yeah. The thing that I really took to in that role is maybe 10% of it was shoveling shit. That was fun. But the really fun part for me was the maintenance. So I got a lot of early experience just building things, fixing things, tractors, trucks.
So you have that mindset, right? You have that background as a builder, a fixer, a doer. And ultimately, if I'm reading between the lines here, it's this other trait after talking to so many founders, the ability to FIO, figure it out, right? That inquisitivity, that curiosity. You remember the first time you like really fixed something important, like an engine or part of some kind of machine, and you're like, holy shit, I did that. I figured it out.
Yeah, I learned that early and really clung to it. So my whole career was really built off of that. And it's just building or fixing products or systems.
Do you remember one of those like early lessons from your dad when it came to like thought process and mindset of figuring it out? Like, did he teach you something?
Yeah, he's a very scientific mind. All of his hobbies were building things, telescopes. He was very into astronomy, built his own telescope, So I remember really young looking at the stars with him with a device that he built that gave you really unique insights. He's big inspiration to me. Extremely smart man.
Is he advising you now as you build this company?
He loves keeping up to date on what we're doing and seeing the industry evolve. He's always been fascinated in what we're building, loves the technology, but also loves the business side.
Interesting. So let's get into Tesla for a little bit. And was that always a company goal for you? You're like, I'm going to work at Tesla. I'm sure as a student, you were following them, you're following the company, and then Elon comes on board, takes over with it and his whole journey. What was it about that? What drew you to Tesla?
Yeah, it was a pretty indirect path. I went to school in British Columbia at the University of Victoria for engineering, and I chose the program there primarily because they had a co-op program. So it was designed to let you go get real work experience with companies.
Right.
And my first internship after one semester of engineering courses, so I had very little idea what I was doing, was with a really small electric bike company. At that time, electric bikes weren't all that common, but there was a company in Vancouver called Grin Technologies that had this idea of why don't we create basically a set of products that allows people to convert their normal bikes to electric bikes. And I started there helping with whatever I could, basically fixing up the building, organizing the shop, but pretty quickly got into more engineering things. And the thing that really caught my interest was battery design. So it's actually building electric bike batteries, trying to find ways to make them more compact, more energy dense, more
lighter.
safe. Yeah. And that really spurred my interest in battery design. After that internship, I built up a pretty good portfolio of work that I had done for the electric bike company. Got an internship at SpaceX. That was following the interest I had in space, largely from my dad.
Love it.
And then after SpaceX, got an opportunity to do an internship with Tesla. So I went there, focused on battery design, was really what I was interested in at the time. I ended up doing 2 internships. And then when I graduated, I was really looking for a startup to go to. I looked at a lot of companies. Tech in the Bay Area was huge and growing, and everybody was raising money at that time. But I was struggling to find people working on technologies that I thought were real, like really had a solid business plan. And Tesla came out, and they really wanted me to join as one of the initial members on the Model 3 battery design team. So ultimately, I went there because I thought this is a product that's going to get to market quickly and a very real technology.
But when you were young in your career, why did you feel the urge or the pull for a startup versus going to a corporate? Was it something to do? Like, what was it?
It was the excitement of something new, something risky. And I think ultimately in my during university, I did internships with big companies, small companies. So I went as big as Google. I was doing engineering there, and as small as a startup car company in Africa. And I love the small company sort of atmosphere where you get to do a little bit of everything, get a great understanding of the overall business. And so when I was graduating, I really wanted to lean that direction. Tesla really caught me because they had a very interesting product, the Model 3, a very interesting part of the product, the battery, and a very fast plan to take that from initial design to market. So I went there, but while I was there, I was just looking for an opportunity to start something.
So interesting. You had the internship there and you had the in, but did you have to go through the full interview process? Let's pull back the curtain a little bit. What was that process like to actually land a job at Tesla?
Yeah. So I had done 2 internships there. They went really well. I had a great relationship with the team. Despite all of that, I actually told them I didn't want to go back full time. And they said, we'll buy your ticket. Just fly down here, do some interviews. Let us tell you about what we're doing. Okay. So I got that flight down to the Bay Area, mostly to visit a lot of my old friends there. But, despite the prior success, despite knowing the team, I had 7 interviews in one day with that team. Gauntlet back to back. And then the final interview was not so much an interview, more a presentation. And the premise of the presentation was show us the hardest thing you've done from an engineering standpoint and persuade us that it was actually hard.
And what was that? What was that example?
It was work that I did at Google. So I was working on a project for Google X, assembling optics for a device they were creating. But it was this sort of manufacturing engineering problem of assembling very delicate plastic lenses. And the challenge was grabbing the lenses, assembling them very precisely without damaging them. There's a lot of intricacies and nuances as to why that was very hard, but it was hard enough to get the job at Tesla.
So the question was, tell us again, it goes back, and I talk about it a lot on this show in a real interview, is tell us what you did. What did you do on that team? What was the problem? And how did you specifically figure it out? Now, obviously you had a team around you, but on an interview process, interviewers want to know what did you specifically do? So those are real important questions. I want to go off script for a minute here because I've been having this conversation with my friends about batteries, like the pros and cons, right? When you're talking about fossil fuels versus batteries, and how critical is it important to weigh the amount, the carbon footprint of what it takes for those elements within the battery versus fossil fuel, and then the conversations around the weight of them on the roads and the infrastructure in the U.S. So how do you weigh which is better? Like at a high level, I'm like, of course, batteries are great, less emissions and everything. But do people really look at like how the batteries are actually created in the long-term effects? I love your take on this.
Yeah, I think one thing that was key in the design for the Model 3 battery that I don't think is very appreciated generally was the challenges designing a battery that was recyclable. So something that at the end of the car's life, you could bring all those materials back, re-refine them, and reuse them. That creates a huge amount of complexity in the design, the selection of materials. And that was a big part of what I was working on with the Model 3 battery, was creating it so that it could be recyclable. I think that's a key piece of all of this, because with fossil fuels, there's always the argument, are batteries better than fossil fuels? I think the important thing with fossil fuels is that they're inherently limited. At some point, there will be no more on Earth. That's going to happen. And so the question for batteries is, does it provide a longer future? Are there enough materials to support the energy needs of the U.S. for a much longer period of time? The answer is yes, especially if they're largely recyclable. I think that was a key piece for me. Very important, but also very challenging in the design process.
But if we're going to run out of fossil fuels one day, how are we going to power the machinery to harness the elements in the, right? Are we going to be able to get to a point of full reliance on electricity to harness the electricity without using fossil fuels?
Yeah, that's the piece. There's energy storage, which is the battery part, and there's energy production. And solar, with good batteries, solar does solve it, and it solves it with a pretty small area of land. You don't need the entire US covered by solar panels, but in order for it to work, you need batteries. So I was working on the battery side. Obviously, there's a lot of work going on the production side.
What do you drive? What do you drive these days?
I have an Audi Allroad.
The electric?
Nope. Not electric.
Why didn't you go electric?
I have this long-standing obsession with Audi, especially their wagons. I had an electric e-Golf when I lived in California. It was an all-electric, limited range car, but in the Bay Area, there's chargers everywhere, so it worked well. When I moved back to the East Coast, at that time, chargers were less prevalent, so I flipped that to the Audi.
My wife has the Q5. Second one, I love it. Side note, I love driving her Audi. But let's keep going there. At what point was it when you're like, I have this idea, I want to go out on my own, I want to try to build something? Was it during your tenure at Tesla?
Yeah, I was at Tesla. I was working with a good friend of mine, Casey Barzik, who's a co-founder of Wynk. He had a distillery in Pennsylvania, so he went to Carnegie Mellon for engineering. In one of his entrepreneurship classes, had to write a business plan, wrote this business plan for a distillery in Pennsylvania, and ultimately decided it was a much better opportunity than finishing at Carnegie. So he dropped out, started a small business.
Dropped out of Carnegie Mellon.
Yep. And he had found an opportunity with a change in tax law in PA that would allow a small PA-based distillery to have an advantage. So he ultimately went and did that. Now, he was building this distillery, which wasn't the thing that I was most interested in the world, but him and I both had this desire to create a new company on our own. So I was doing some work for him on the side, just helping him over the course of a year and a half or so. And when the Model 3 program was coming to an end and my part in that Model 3 battery design was largely completed, decided to move back to work with him to create a new company. And over the years, this has become one of the new companies that we created.
So the original distillery, I assume it was a spirit brand, like it was some type of spirit that he wanted to create. So where and how did the kernel of a new cannabis beverage come into play? Are you if you don't mind me asking, are you a cannabis consumer, a cannabis user, or was it more about the idea and the white space opportunity and where the market was going in the cannabis space and deregulation?
Yep. Yeah, so through the distillery, we knew how to make drinks.
Mm-hmm.
We had built that institutional knowledge. And when we looked at the cannabis industry right around COVID, we saw an increase in cannabis sales, more and more states creating medical or recreational programs. But what we didn't see was much activity with beverage. So we looked into this and we're like, why is there no beverage? Seems like a pretty compelling alternative to alcohol.
Or inhaling it, you're trying to remove like carcinogens, other ways to consume it, other delivery vehicles besides edibles.
And the challenge for beverage at that time was you couldn't ship products across state lines. So all the states had their own frameworks. All the THC originating from marijuana had to be grown in the state, processed in the state, and sold in the state. So what that meant for beverage was if you wanted to make beverages, you had to get a cannabis license. You had to build a beverage facility in each state. And that facility could only service the stores in the state, which were pretty limited.
Yeah, that full vertical integration in that state exactly where you were.
So we sat back and we're like, it seems like the problem is production, right? You do the math on building a facility, it would never pay itself off in one market. You really need one facility supplying the entire US, just like traditional beverage does. So that didn't work. And what I did was use my background in engineering and designed a mobile solution, something that you could produce beverages anywhere. The real sort of opportunity we saw was to not go out and get any licenses in any markets, because that's time consuming and expensive. Right. What we did is partner with people that already had licenses and facilities and built a production solution we could bring to them. So what we would do is bring a brand and a production solution. Our partners in each market would bring a license and a path to market.
Smart collaborations.
Yeah. And in the early days, late 2020, early 2021, this was a 53-foot tractor trailer we built, and it had everything you needed to make beverages on site. So we'd bring the ingredients and the empty cans and a team. We'd borrow a portion of their facility, set up our canning line in about 4 hours, and we'd build them enough inventory for a couple months. And they would just store that in available space in the building, run through it, we'd come back and restock it. Now, the other thing that we did early days is said, okay, we need to make a solution to produce drinks, but we also need to define what this drink is going to be. And Casey Parzik, Sean Sheehan, and I were not cannabis consumers at all, but we started formulating and we tried high dose, low dose, medium dose. We used varying levels of sugar.
Yeah, CBD versus THC. What's a great combination? How does it? How do they affect each other?
Yeah, and we were just experimenting, totally new to this category. But what we realized very early was the very low dose drinks, the ones that, much like beer, barely affect you if you have one, were really compelling to non-cannabis consumers like us. Because now you have a product that sits adjacent to alcohol, has a similar intensity of effect. And that space was a pretty blank slate for us. There wasn't a lot of product out there. And in many of the markets, it wasn't possible to produce drinks. So that was the foundation of Wynk. And the Wynk name was seltzer with a wink of THC, just a small amount of THC. And this was designed for the alcohol consumer interested in cannabis, but a lot of people have bad experiences where they try a product that is way too high a dose and they'll never go back to cannabis. We wanted to provide an on-ramp for all of these higher dose product forms.
Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
And then the fact that it's sugar-free increases additional consumption, right? For calorie conscious, you're weight conscious, you're not getting that. Like, it's a flavored seltzer with a wink of THC. They're absolutely delicious. Without getting too deep and nerdy on this one, how hard is it to take cannabis from the plant form into a liquid drinkable form? Like, it seems pretty scientific.
Yeah, fundamentally, if you look at alcoholic beverage supply chain and production, it actually looks very similar. So you start with a crop, you take that crop and you somehow extract the active out of it. In the case of beer, it's fermentation to produce alcohol. And then that goes into a batching process and a canning process. With cannabis, you're starting with the crop. You're going through an extraction process. So you extract the oils out of the plant. You're going through a distillation process. So you're purifying the THC. And then the one step that's really important is emulsification, because what you're getting from the plant is an oil, and you need that to mix with water. But emulsification is very common in beverage already. Many of the flavors you use are emulsified ingredients. It's the same thing with cannabis. They're just more specialized.
But you got to keep the potency as well, too. I'm sure something is lost in the process.
The potency actually increases through the process. So you're going from...
It's almost like proofing down, right? It's almost like proofing down in booze, right? Okay, got it.
Exactly. There's a challenge around stability. So getting it in the can and getting the potency to stay through the shelf life.
So there's like a half-life to it.
Yeah, and there's a variety of factors that play into that. One of them is quality of the emulsion itself, the ability of the emulsion to not break down. There's other issues where emulsions have a tendency to stick to the liner in the can. Although you see cans as these aluminum packages, all cans are lined with a very thin film it's a plastic. And there's lots of different types of liners. Some are compatible with emulsions. Others, the emulsions tend to stick to them. So you have to be very careful with what type of can you use. And then the last piece is formulation itself. So some beverage formulations are really hard on emulsions and break them down. We did a lot of work in the early days to figure all this out and get
lots of R&D there. But how do you ensure the consistent quality and potency of the actual plant itself? Are you handling all the production and manufacturing and harvesting?
Yeah, so
like the whole production line. Like, how do you keep the quality control?
Yeah, on everything. The way that we operate today, we're buying the emulsion with THC in it, just like any other ingredient. What we get with that is a chain of custody with third-party lab testing each step from plant through to this ingredient we're buying. So we know what the potency of the ingredient is, and therefore we can dose it correctly in the can. The other thing that we did very early days of Wynk was buy all the same lab equipment the state labs have for testing potency. So we always send our products out for third-party testing, but before we do that, we do the same test production.
Pause for a second.
Yep.
Throughout this whole building process, how much were you going back to watching your dad and what he does in his line of work and kind of his thought process and thinking?
He did a lot of the same type of lab work in his career. So it was always interesting talking to him. Chromatography, which is the type of analytical chemistry you're using to test THC potency in liquid. It's very complex. He did a lot of that in his work. So always interesting to bounce these things off him.
Yeah, fun at the Thanksgiving at the Sunday dinner table. Angus, you have this idea, you have the knowledge, you're gaining the knowledge. You guys are a bunch of engineers, you figure things out and you're going in the right direction. But with any startup, any entrepreneurship journey, you're going to get punched in the face early on. What was one of those first times you got punched in the face real hard? And you're like, shit, all right, we're questioning what we're doing. Are we doing something wrong? Are we in the right space? Are we really doing the right thing here? And should we keep going?
Yeah, we've been punched in the face a lot since 2020. I think and countless examples. I do think a big one that's really important for our story was this initial premise for the business of let's create a low dose product that will help alcohol consumers switch over to this new category. That premise was flawed from the start. And the issue that we had was we created Wynk. It's the same Wynk today. But in the early days, the first year and a half or 2 years of the company, these products could only be sold through dispensaries. And so the majority of dispensary consumers, people that know dispensaries exist, are comfortable going in there. They're going in there to get very high dose products because they've built up a tolerance. They're daily consumers. They want closer to best bang for your buck than a low dose, somewhat premium beverage. So where we really struggled, especially in the first year, was really getting non-cannabis consumers to go to a dispensary. We thought it would be easy. Like here.
It's
this
an extra
is a new
stop,
product
but it's
for
an
them.
Extra stop, though. It's an inconvenience. It's not easy. It's not. You don't have DTC distribution at this point.
It's an inconvenience. And the other thing is most of the consumers we were trying to get had no idea that this category even existed. There's so much stigma around cannabis. People didn't want to go to a dispensary. They weren't comfortable. And so what we learned quite early is that 2.5 milligrams in a can is not enough for the people going to dispensaries.
No, it's not worth it.
Yeah. So we had to pivot about 8 months in. We went to a slightly higher dose for the brand Wynk, and we created another brand, Countdowns, intended to be a much higher dose strength. So we now do Countdown through dispensaries at 100 milligrams a can, which is about 2/3 of the THC content of a joint. These are very high dose drinks. And even today in the dispensary channel, that higher dose product works way better.
For that market.
Yeah. So that was a big punch in the face, and it was an experiment we ran to see if we could get the alcohol consumer into the dispensary. Turns out it's very expensive to do that from a marketing standpoint. But something that's evolved really starting a year and a half ago was the opportunity to take THC derived from hemp. So hemp and marijuana are both cannabis plants. Marijuana's in the plant. Marijuana has higher THC. Hemp looks just the same, but it has less than 0.3% THC by weight. So very little THC in this plant, but it's federally legal. And so what we started to do a year and a half ago was take a lot of hemp, extract a small amount of THC from it, purify it, and then dose it back into the drink at 2.5 and 5 milligrams. And by doing so, it's now a hemp-derived beverage. It has the same effect. It has the same THC molecule. But due to the supply chain, it's federally legal, and therefore you can ship across state lines. And for the first time, we could put this drink we created to be an alternative for the alcohol consumer, not cannabis consumer. For the first time, we can put that in the liquor store. So now
it can be in the liquor store, and you don't have to go to the dispensary, and now you have a choice when you get to the counter.
Yep, exactly. And more importantly, you can produce all of these products in one facility. So we have a huge facility that we produce beverages at 1,500 cans per minute, very high rate, like mainstream beverage. We produce Wynk at scale very cheaply. We ship it by the truckload to distributors, and it ends up in liquor stores. So this original idea was maybe a little bit too early because the framework didn't exist. A year or so ago, we pivoted the company to really focus on this opportunity. And we're finding now that original premise was right. It just needed the right distribution.
It's a pivot, right? And it's not a slight change, but like you're talking about the two different products and how it opened up from a regulatory standpoint. But there's a part in the middle here that we need to discuss is marketing and getting the word out.
Yeah.
What was that journey like to spread the word of, hey, we're here, this is a product, try it out, and then build demand and distribution?
Yeah. We start with the brand. The Wynk brand in 2021 was really built for a medical cannabis market. So most of the consumers were medical patients that had an ID card that allowed them to go to a dispensary. So the packaging in those days looked a lot more medical, more bland, plain colors. As we saw this opportunity to sell in liquor stores start to evolve, we knew we needed to shift the brand to be far more mainstream. So we did a huge brand redesign. Still, the Wynk name looks much different, much more appealing to the mainstream consumer, fits way better on the shelf alongside alcoholic RTDs. So we did a huge brand overhaul that was timed really well for our leap into the sort of mainstream adult beverage channel. And then in our marketing, we're always looking for the right way to do this. The reality is the majority of consumers that are likely to buy our product don't know it exists yet, don't know the category exists, don't know that they can buy THC
it's awareness
in liquor stores. Yeah. And over the past year, we've really tried to find every way we can to get this product in front of people through sampling, micro-influencers, lots of sort of local events in market, just normalizing the product. And ultimately, what we've been successful in doing is getting into some larger events and being sold in the beer tents right alongside.
I was about to say, like festival.
Yeah.
So who's sorry?
Yeah, there's events that we've done like Riot Fest and West Fest in Chicago, where when you go to the beer tent, there's the Molson Coors portfolio of 6 or so brands, and there's Wynk, and the price is the same. It's just side by side, directly adjacent, price parity. And that's, since we started in 2020, that's the dream. Get this new category of product directly adjacent to mainstream alcohol in places that people trust at the same price.
Physically putting it in front of them. You're at a festival or you're at a liquor store and you have two options in front of you. Wait, I didn't know that existed. And maybe I'm not a drinker. Maybe I'm picking up a bottle of wine or booze for an event where I'm having friends and family. But I also know that maybe my sister-in-law doesn't drink, but you know what? She might actually like this so she could be part of it and not feel left out. It's the awareness factor. And then you mentioned the festivals too. You think about it, you're there and it's literally in front of you. Like the two options are in front of you. I didn't know that existed. That's like the aha moment that you're looking for? And then obviously the sampling.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Now, the other thing that we tried very hard to educate consumers on is the fact that this is a very controllable experience with Wynk. Mm-hmm. This isn't something that's going to completely turn you upside down.
No.
It's low dose. You can control the experience. You can have one and have a very small effect, or you can have many. This is just like beer or wine. So we spend a lot of time trying to educate consumers on that and really get rid of some of the stigma or fear of cannabis and show that this is very approachable. It's worth trying, and it's not going to completely change your night unless you want it to, in which case you have more.
So what's the next phase? Give us a little bit of alpha here. What's next for the brand? What's next for the product?
We have with the regulatory environment the way it is today, with no further changes to regulations, there's a lot of markets still available to us. We're increasing our penetration in our markets each month, launching new ones as we can. So we're launching Florida and Georgia right now. Very exciting. Those will be two very big markets. So with the products that we have today and the regulatory landscape, there's immense opportunity to just really dig deeper in our markets. On top of that, there's opportunities to create more products, more options for folks. So we've always leaned very lightly flavored LaCroix adjacent. We'll start to lean into more flavorful products. We've stayed 5 milligrams and under for Wynk. I think you'll see us go a little bit higher. There's alternate product forms that are not drinks that sort of meet a different occasion that consumers want.
Like what?
You'll see.
We're talking
You'll see very soon. Yeah. So beverages are good for a lot of occasions, but there's other occasions that people are using THC that beverages don't quite fit. So we want to provide those options as well.
But as a business owner, how do you stay nimble? How do you stay true to this idea of innovation and fail fast, right? Like, how do you stay true to that while you're continuing to grow? I don't know your financial situation there. You have investors, you have money, like there's people that you got to serve and investments and all that. But how do you stay fast and nimble as you grow this business?
The decision we made really early on was to own production and control production. Part of the reason for that was quality is of the highest priority. We want high quality product and we want control over how it's produced, make sure the potency is right and the experience is repeatable. But the other reason is we saw this even in 2021, the rules were changing monthly in our markets. And those rules can be product forms that are allowed, but they can also be packaging rules. So certain language that needs to appear on the package. This was changing very quickly. And in order to keep up, you had to own production. You couldn't be beholden to co-packers managing your supply chain. So every product we've ever produced under our brands, we've produced. We haven't used co-packers. Today, that's even more important than ever because with these products being available through liquor stores, all the states are trying to figure out how to regulate it. And there's no large federal regulation controlling packaging rules, product rules. So states are doing it and they're now changing weekly. Every week there's some update.
Of it.
Yeah. And so we have, it seems every month there's sort of a new project. Like we need to make a quick packaging change. We need to get this product produced and to the market immediately because the rules changed overnight. That's given us an edge and an ability to keep up that many others do not have. That's always, owning production has probably been the single biggest advantage we've had in the ability to adapt to this ever-changing. We also do all of our formulations in-house. We have a formulation lab, so creating our own flavors. It speeds up the cycle. And
everything's
then
in-house, just building in-house, right? That vertical integration.
Everything's in-house. But the other thing that's interesting about us is that we created this production technology. We created these two brands, Wynk and Countdown, but we also created a separate company that is a co-packing company. So when I say we have a huge facility, we do all our own production, the company that does that, which is ours, also produces mainstream non-alcoholic and alcoholic beverages. Yeah. So we have this sort of revenue generator that has immense capacity that's used up by other brands. And as Wynk grows and Countdown grows, we can continue to use more and more of our own capacity. But in the meantime, it's operating at scale. It's being fully utilized. Yeah.
And funding back in the organization. I want to pivot for a second and talk about how you build teams. You've been in a lot of organizations, big, small, startups, and all that too. When you're interviewing, when someone gets to you, I assume that they're going to have the on paper experience and skill set. But how do you truly evaluate if that person's going to be a value add for the team? What type of questions do you ask?
I think you alluded to the right question in the beginning, which is, what did you actually do? Not what did your company do, or what success has a certain subset of the company done that you've happened to be part of. It's what did you actually do? What team did you build there? What were you focused on? And it's really, sometimes it's hard to dig down and figure out what people actually did. They like saying what the company did.
They talk around it.
Yeah. The same is true of issues. Oftentimes when you're interviewing people, it's because there's something going on at their company that they don't like. And a lot of times I find that if you ask the right questions, you find that it's not actually the company doing something wrong, it's that individual. And therefore they're not a good fit. Because if they don't have a clear way or a clear path to resolve whatever the issue is in their current company, it's not the type of person that we want.
Yeah.
So those two things are important. I think for certain roles, that question we spoke about in the beginning, which is what's the hardest problem you've solved and why? That's pretty broadly useful. It's interesting because one, it shows you what sort of challenges people have overcome. But I think more importantly, it shows you what people think is hard.
That's what it comes down to. So this has been a really interesting conversation. I feel like I could talk about like specific elements of what you're building for hours, but we don't have that right now. So let's bring it home here. You've had incredible experience. You've been around tremendous. Have you had interaction with Elon?
I did, yeah.
How'd that go?
A few different times. Fortunately, not an engineering meeting. caught him in passing. But yeah, look, an absolutely amazing individual. And I will say, working in his companies, it's not just that he's able to get good teams to do the work for him. He's, at least when I was there, so involved in the technical details.
He's hands-on.
Extremely hands-on. And oftentimes going against what his teams are telling him. Not going against it because of any sort of personality thing. It's more just has an amazing ability to get down to sort of the fundamental facts and make decisions. And in a lot of cases, at least while I was there, were decisions that a lot of very smart people disagreed with. They all ended up being wrong.
So what did you learn from that experience from Elon that you're applying now as a leader?
I think it's just at the highest level, just he had an obsession with the product. If the product is not great and the quality is not great, you may as well just give up. Not worth it. So he held that above everything else. Let's produce good products. Down at the engineering level, and a lot of what I saw with his interaction with our teams was just getting to the fundamental truths, not about people's opinions or who has the strongest personality. It's what is the fundamentals of this? What are the facts telling us? He had a very unique ability to cut through all of the noise, get to the fundamentals, and make a great decision.
I dig it, man. That's part of your journey, man. It adds to the story. It's what you learn from these folks. So let's bring it home here. First of all, congrats on the success of Wynk. It's a fantastic product. And this conversation, when you're enjoying a product and now you know the story about it, it just adds to it. And you've reached levels of success and you're continuing to succeed. But Angus, how do you define success?
I think for Wynk, it's still such early days. The market as a whole, it's only just getting into people's heads. All the brands are doing their part to build awareness, but we've just scratched the surface. So when I look at Wynk and think about what point would I look at it and say it's a success, it's really when everywhere you go in High Noon and White Claw, Wynk should be beside it. And it should be beside it in similarly compelling packaging. It should be beside it at the same price point. And it should be seen in the market with the best marketing. The marketing playbook, it's shifted over the past 4 years from the sort of cannabis marketing in the dispensary channel, which is largely limited and a very different consumer. Now we're competing with High Noon. You asked earlier if I think our competitors can, which I said for a few reasons, no, but I think a larger competitor to us is the alcohol equivalents, White Claw and High Noon. So yeah, if we can successfully get product placements beside those two, give people an alternative. It doesn't have to be a swap. People don't have to stop drinking High Noon because they're drinking Wynk. I think that the two can grow together still. But I'd love to see us beside all those products at all the retailers at the same price and give consumers the best marketing experience and a marketing experience that's really similar to what they're used to with RTDs and alcohol.
Love it. I guess I want to thank you so much for your time and sharing your journey here. I want everyone to check out drinkwynk.com. That's WYNK, DRINK, WYNK.com. They also launched a brand new limited flavor cran blood orange, which is absolutely delicious. So definitely check it out. Give it a shot. Give it a shot. Where else, Angus? Where else could folks find you? Where could they connect? Where could they learn more?
Yeah, we're available online. So if we're not sold at retailers in your market yet, you can still buy online. We have a store locator on our website, so you can check there to see if we're in stores near you. In the interim, buy online. We have a subscription program to make it convenient for people that don't have Wynk in stores near them. So you can sign up, get 20% off. It'll automatically send you new orders each month. Lots of different ways to get Wynk, and hopefully increasingly it will just be available at your local liquor store.
Love it. Good stuff. Angus Rittenberg, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Everyone listening, if this show meant something to you, leave a review rating. It goes a long way. Sharing means caring. Definitely check out Wynk. Remember, be good to yourself, be better to others, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.